Okay, so hello, everyone. Before we kick off the event, I would like to invite Meredith Brown to the stage to share a land acknowledgement.
Okay, hi. So, Dalhousie University is located in Chibuktuk on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And we are grateful to live, work, and learn on this territory and recognize that we are all treaty people with a responsibility to respect and uphold the inherent treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples. We commit to understanding our role and responsibility toward truth and reconciliation, and to the continued learning about the historical and present day oppression of lands, cultures, and the original peoples across Mi'kmaq and more broadly in what is now known as Canada.
All right, thank you, Meredith. All right. And I think it's important to say that while we're not in Ottawa today, NEADS is based out of Ottawa, which is the traditional unceded and unsurrendered lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. And we have people calling in from across the country, across Turtle Island, and across various treaty and ancestral lands. All forms of oppression are interconnected, especially colonialism and ableism. And November is Indigenous Disability Awareness Month. And Indigenous people are disproportionately more likely to be disabled because of colonial violence and trauma, but they also offer a lot to the disability community, different conceptions, different ways of understanding disability, different ways of accommodating it. So I'd really encourage you to read up on Indigenous Disability Awareness Month, commit to that allyship, and remember that truth and reconciliation is an ongoing practice for everyone. All right, so with that, welcome everyone, both in person and online, to the second stop on NEADS State of the Schools tour in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I put that in there to remind me where I am. It's been a very long week. So the National Educational Association of Disabled Students is so excited to be here and so grateful to our host, Dalhousie Accessibility Inclusion Society, and to all of the students and student groups here today. So before we get into it, a bit about NEADS for those we haven't met yet. NEADS is a by and for cross-disability national organization supporting full access to education and employment for disabled students and graduates. Our main objectives are student debt reduction, employment, and experience in class and on campus. We have a lot of stuff going on, so I'm just going to highlight a few of our main projects. So the Virtual Access for All project aims to support disabled post-secondary students transitioning into post-secondary education or other transitions within their educational and employment careers. So that consists of the quarterly State of the Schools publications, and those focus on accommodations and accessibility at post-secondary institutions across Canada, and other really cool topics like attendant care services, self-advocacy, and student groups. This is written by the incredible Elizabeth Moeller, who is here with us today over there. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, incredible. We also have a regular webinar series, and that covers topics like disability rights, disability history. We invite our partners, our speakers, to share their knowledge and expertise with our students, and it's really great. They're all available on our YouTube, definitely worth checking out. We also maintain a directory of on-campus disabled student groups, different service providers, and also internships and mentorship opportunities. It's also generously funded by Employment and Social Development Canada's Supports for Students Learning project, so couldn't have happened without them, and it really did increase our capacity to provide funding for our awards. This is the part where we listen because it's the awards. They're very cool. So the NEADS National Student Awards program aims to address the disproportionate financial barriers we face as disabled students, and also to recognize the contributions of the students within the NEADS community, because y'all are really cool. So awards include the NEADS National Student Awards, and those are about $3,000 each. And last year, we distributed 42 of those $3,000 awards. We also have a number of additional ones, including the AMI Robert Pearson scholarships and the Canada Post Award valued at $10,000. We also launched the Accessibility Resilience Program at the onset of COVID-19 to address the disproportionate costs we were facing transitioning to online learning. So these emergency relief grants intend to reimburse you for those costs like ergonomic equipment, assistive technology, tuition bills, internet bills, all of that kind of stuff. And as of June 2022, over 175 students received ARP awards, and over $250,000 was distributed. And that is really hard to do, and that's all done by Katya Newman. Hi, Katya. Hi. Don't worry, we have a ton of other stops. We do this every single time. Yeah. Oh, there will be a part where like you guys don't laugh at my jokes, and then I'll make you laugh anyways. And it's kind of part of the gig. Anyways, we also host disabilityawards.ca, which is the world's largest online directory of disability-specific scholarships. The world is very big. The internet's very big. We're the biggest. All right, and that is all handled by Aaliyah Peta Grant. Hi, Aaliyah. Awesome. Aaliyah is the one you met at registration. All right, and because I introduced the whole team and not myself, hi, I'm Carly, pronoun she, her, L. I'm NEADS Communications and Partnerships Director. I don't have to tell you what I do because I'm doing it right now. All right, about the tour, and then I'll be over, and then we can actually get into the event. So the NEADS Day of the Schools tour is first off hybrid. It is a cross-Canada tour, and the goal is to visit disabled students and disabled student groups at their schools, meeting them where they are, finding out what they're going through on a daily basis, really understanding regional impacts, especially. We were just talking about how like on the waterfront, it's cold and it really like affects your joints and all that. That's the kind of stuff we want to know. Like, how does your location, how does this school impact your education? Because we know that across Canada, it's really going to be different for different students at different schools. So we are here to find out. I hope you're ready. The state of the schools. No one? State of the schools? Thanks, Elizabeth. Elizabeth has to laugh or else our dinner after this gets a little awkward. They like that, okay. Anyways, so I will say that NEADS recently launched the Back to School National Advocacy Campaign because over the summer, a lot of disabled students were reaching out to NEADS and they're like, I'm super anxious, I feel super alone, mask and vaccine mandates are being rolled back, and I feel like I'm the only one that cares. And when like 50 people text you to say that, you gotta be like, shockingly, you're not alone. So we launched a social media campaign, and it's meant to give disabled students a platform to share their stories, their perspectives, their experiences, and their opinions, whether they're positive or negative. So that will culminate in a final report. First off, it is a great advocacy tool, but second off, it's a great way to connect with disabled students across Canada, because unfortunately things are so bad that it's bad across the entire country. Yikes. All right, so if you do want to participate in that, please let me know. Either find me today at the event or email me at carly.fox@neads.ca. And heads up, we do actually care about making this event worth your time. So any like feedback, any opinions, experiences shared today will inform our State of the Schools reports, but we will not name drop you. Unless you want that, then please let me know, and then I will gladly name drop you. Thank you to Amber, our captioner, for captioning this 4-hour event. And with that, I will hand it over to Elizabeth Moeller for her presentation on self-advocacy. Yay! Give it up. Clapping, yeah. There's a
excellent. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth Moeller. I'm a doctoral candidate at Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. Some people call it Little London. I just call it London. It is the home of the Lenape and the Wendat people. And I don't live in London. I actually live in Toronto, Treaty 13. So I wanted to just give some context around that as well. Because this is Indigenous and Disability Awareness Month, I'm reading a really great book by Robin Wall-Kimmer called Braiding Sweetgrass, and just thinking about my relationship to the land. My doctoral studies focus on self-managed attendant care and how adults with physical disabilities negotiate care. So just wanted to set that context. So the importance of self-advocacy. I think Carly said it very well in the opening remarks. Advocacy has really changed in this pandemic. So whether you've needed to advocate for yourself to safely return to campus, or whether you've needed to return to a virtual campus and that campus wasn't accessible, like Proctor Track that crashes the computer when you're using a screen reader, fun times. We've all had to sort of do advocacy a little bit differently. So it's an important part of the disclosure process. But I say that knowing that unless you're dealing with an accessible education provider or disability services provider, every university has a different name for that office. It's very confusing. You don't need to disclose your disability to a professor. It's the accommodation. And some students don't know that. I worked in student government for a number of years. I've taken a step back to focus on my studies. And students would often tell me that professors ask what their disability is and they disclose it. So although I say it's an important part of disclosure, it's really the accommodation you're disclosing. But students with disabilities can ensure that they receive the support they need. Even though it's challenging, it's an important step on the road to success. So, you know, that's kind of framing advocacy, and there's lots of kind of supports around how to advocate and what tools to use. So go to the next slide. So tips on being an effective advocate, because there are some good tips. So understanding your own disability, strengths, and challenges. So this is really interesting, sort of to break this down. Really thinking about how you learn, and there's lots of resources on campus, like learning resource centers that can help with that, as well as mylearningcoach.ca. Yeah, free assessments, psych ed assessments. So if you're not sure, maybe if there's a problem and you know there's a problem, but you're not sure what it is and you're not sure what accommodations you need, those assessments can be mighty expensive. So mylearningcoach.ca, we'll pop it in the chat later for folks on Zoom, is a great free resource to get some support. But yes.
How much money does that cost?
Wait a minute. Wait for this, guys. It's free.
Free?
Okay, so Carly, it's $0 and 0 cents.
Not a penny.
I don't know if I heard free, but I think it's free. It's free. And we like joke about that, but say that because assessments can run. I just worked with a student on a case where the assessment was $4,000. They couldn't get the bursary to pay for it because the bursary needed proof they were disabled. So it just went around in circles and it was awful. But knowing your strengths, knowing what you're good at. So for example, myself, I know that one of my strengths is being able to use technology. And so I'm able to often explain what accommodations I need, and I know the technology I need. So understanding your legal rights and responsibilities regarding accommodations, this will obviously vary depending on the province, but understanding what your rights are, schools should have outlined what accommodations they provide and should outline what your responsibilities are as a student. Some do this better than others. Sometimes it's a bit of a guessing game. We were talking in St. John's about how accommodations for grad students are never really laid out and nobody really knows what they can ask for because a lot of the undergrad accommodations don't work. So just, you know, really understanding what our rights are and what we can ask for. So when disclosing to professors or instructors, make sure that you're finding an appropriate time. So not after class when they're rushed, but I always say time, space, continuum. I sort of make this joke, but it's really about finding the time and finding a space that feels safe for you and will make them feel like you're not sort of interrogating them. So asking to grab a coffee after class or meeting in office hours, or I guess in the virtual world doing a Zoom meeting. But I know with one of my professors, she was always so swamped at the end of our 2-hour Zoom lecture that I said, hey, I can imagine that you're probably pretty, you know, exhausted. Do you want to, can we schedule some time on Zoom this week to chat about some accommodations? And they appreciate that. So time, space, continuum, good thing to think about. All right, next slide. Tips advocate. All right, so knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, really important. And you need to know yourself and your disability, and you need to be prepared to clearly describe your disability. So this kind of sounds obvious, but just knowing what are my limitations. So for example, myself in a graduate environment, one of my limitations is going to conferences. It's pretty hard when you can't see to get on a plane and go somewhere you've never been before with no support. So my supervisor and I actually put an application in, and we were able to get a research assistant in our lab, an undergrad who's amazing and comes to conferences with me as a support person. But that goes back to my other point in my previous slide, that accommodations are sometimes tricky at the graduate level because we don't know what we actually can ask for. So knowing your strengths and your weaknesses also really important. So knowing like, where am I going to need some support? Maybe I'm somebody that struggles with communication in a verbal setting, so I want to write out my points. So just knowing what those are, and be self-aware, really important. So you know, knowing what you need, asking for help from a support staff. Or I would add here, and I didn't have this on my slide, but really important, student union or student ally, because sometimes we want to ask for help, but support staff don't always feel safe for us. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They're doing their best. But yeah, I think this is another point. Practice disclosing with people that you're comfortable with and people that make you feel supported. So if I wanted to practice my disclosure, I might say, hey, Carly, can we grab a quick Zoom coffee? I'm really trying to figure out what to say to this professor about accommodations I'll need for a practicum placement, and I want to run some ideas by you. And hopefully Carly would say yes. Thanks, Carly. Know your needs. All right. So you can assess types of accommodations you may need, and they will be effective in determining what kind of assistance you need. So I touched on this earlier, but evaluate past accommodations and learn about different types of accommodations and learn about different areas of difficulty. So this kind of goes back to what was working, what's not. So I often like to talk to students about what went well, what was tricky, and what would you do differently. So, you know, I might say for my Zoom classes, what went well is that they were on Zoom, and Zoom's an accessible platform. What was tricky was all of the conversation in the chat. As a screen reader user, I'm literally listening to every single word in the chat, plus the professor, auditory overload. So what would I do differently? I would ask the professor ahead of time if chats could be directed to one person, or if there could be a time designated in the class for chats on Zoom. So that's kind of what we mean there about, you know, determining what assistance you need and knowing what works and what isn't working. So evaluating past things and seeing what's working. All right, practice assertiveness. So knowing your rights and vocalizing your needs and taking responsibility for your disability, not expecting others to problem solve or make decisions for you. But this is really tricky too, because sometimes, you know, being assertive, we don't always know how to do it, and it takes practice. And sometimes also it can feel like when you're assertive, like you're being angry. So sometimes getting somebody else to read over an email or a letter can be really helpful. So if I was struggling with a professor and needed an extra pair of eyes on an email, I might say, hey, Carly, I'm writing this email to a professor. There's a lot of chat going on in the Zoom lectures, and it's really distracting. Can you read this over to make sure the tone's okay? And hopefully Carly would say yes. But thanks, Carly. You're playing along. Awesome. But really all that to say, it's just, you know, being assertive is really tricky. You don't want to be adversarial, but sometimes we do need to be assertive, especially when our marks are at stake. Scholarships can be at stake. I'm a SHRC holder for your fellowship, and that means keeping an 80% average plus the number of publications and conferences every year have to be attended, and annual reports, which aren't accessible, have to be filled in. So I guess all that to say, sometimes the assertiveness process can feel daunting. I think that the biggest example of being assertive that I can give is the SHRC application was not accessible. SHRC stands for Social Science, Humanities, and Research Council. So when I started my doctoral program, I actually wrote to the folks in Ottawa. I got an auto-generated email. Those are fun. And I kept calling back. And then finally, they're like, come to Ottawa and show us what's not accessible. So it can work to be persistent and to be assertive. I didn't have persistence on this slide, but I think I should have. All right. Develop self-confidence. This is really important, especially because sometimes with our disability, we don't always have as much work experience as our peers. I know that was the case for me. And sometimes too, we're shot down from programs. I was talking to a couple of colleagues earlier this week here on the NEADS team, and I shared that I'd applied for a social work master's, and a comment was made about how I would do placement in a hospital. So I lacked the confidence at that point in my life, and I decided not to accept the offer. But, you know, studying disability and civil rights movement, it sounds hokey, but learning from the people that have come before us and what they've done, learning about disability from diversity or cultural perspectives, those can all really help. And finding peer support among other disabled students. That's huge when you know that you're not alone and somebody else says, yeah, I had that happen too, and here's how I handled it. Or solidarity, I don't know how to handle this, but let's talk about it together. Learning to develop the strengths that you developed as a disabled person. So often I think about the fact that I can problem solve really well because I have to do it every day, multiple times a day. So, you know, that's kind of a strength that I've developed as somebody with a disability. So develop more self-confidence tips. So studying not expecting others to problem solve or make decisions for you, and taking responsibility for your disability. And again, you know, looking at the people that have come before you. So utilize support. So Learning Disabilities Online gave a really good quote here. A person who self-advocates should not feel alone. Good self-advocates know how to ask questions and get help from other people. And I believe that's, part of what we're doing here today is just all collectively brainstorming and advocating. But our online self-advocacy campaign, check it out, neads.ca, is a really great resource as well to just get some resources, know that you're not alone. We have a really great website called breakingitdown.ca, which has resources for students that are graduating and for employers. Disabilityawards.ca, like all of those are really good resources as well. And there's all kinds of podcasts too that are coming out around like disability in higher education. So Western has one called Accessibility. Like sit down, have a cup of tea and talk about accessibility. So people just really sharing their collective wisdom and experiences. So prepare for your meetings. This is really important. So outline your accessibility needs and possible accommodations you could benefit from. So what I do every year, because at my university, we have to prove every year we're disabled. So we have to go in person and we have to tell the university that we still need accommodations. And, I respect that that might be needed for their funding, but it's very difficult as someone that lives 2 hours away. So I often prepare a list of what I need, what's worked in the past. So I will come in and say, I'm a grad student, so I don't need a lot of the accommodations on offer. I don't need a note taker. I don't need extra time for exams, but here's what I do need. And generally, because they're not standard accommodations, it's a bit of a process, but I've prepared in advance and I know what I want to say. And identify goals and desirable outcomes as well. Understand duty to accommodate and undue hardship. If anybody wants to read, Barbara Roberts wrote a paper along with myself in 2014 about the essential course requirements for graduate students. I don't want to say it's a great read, but it is a great read. So yeah, check that out. So that's important, understanding what the duty to accommodate is, because sometimes you will have to push back a little bit. So next slide, play nice if you can. If you can, play nice. Service providers do want to help, but they have to navigate ableist systems and policies. And by working together, you're more likely to receive the help that you need and understand some of those power dynamics. Sometimes there's a really great book. It's all about negotiation. And it talks about, how to problem solve. So sometimes if you can just kind of put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, Carly, I can appreciate your caseload is 900 people, because that's actually what it is for a counselor at Western University in our accessible education. So Carly, I can appreciate your caseload is 900 people. How can we problem solve together to make sure that I get the textbooks I need on time this semester? And hopefully Carly would come up with something brilliant. Excellent. All right. Next slide, ask what is available. So you could learn about better accommodations if you just ask what is available. So sometimes asking what's on offer instead of just reading off your list can be really helpful. We might prevent ourselves from accessing holistic, comprehensive wraparound support. So certainly coming prepared with the list of what you need is helpful, but also saying like, what can we do here? What's possible? What could success look like for me this semester? What can we do to brainstorm around some of the constraints that we're talking about? I find that can be really helpful, and also just reaching out to other students if you can in your program that have perhaps used accommodations. In my program, there was a couple of other students with vision loss, but they joined the program after me, so I was sort of the guinea pig. That was fine. But being able to sort of reach out and talk to people and figure out, what's worked. But you can learn about better accommodations if you kind of ask what's available. Bring peer support. I like to say it's the army, but not really. So disabled student groups and unions will let you bring a peer support to accessible learning or accessible education meetings. I know in my role at Western, I went to many with students. The role can be simply a silent supporter. So the person coming as the support person is not saying anything. They're just there sort of holding space and energy. They also might be a note taker. So if you're somebody that maybe needs to focus on the meeting and isn't able to process note taking, they can do that. They can also sort of help you if you want help summarizing, your thoughts. So, you know, maybe I bring Carly to a meeting. Carly and I have prepared before, and Carly says, okay, Elizabeth, I think you were really here to try and figure out what we can do around getting accommodations for conferences. Am I getting that right? So the peer support can kind of that threefold. So the silent supporter taking notes or sort of helping you be your voice when maybe your voice is feeling a little tired and weak. We've all been there. So sometimes when our voices are tired, it's helpful to have somebody there that can sort of pick up our torch and speak, not for us, but with us and alongside us. Right, Carly?
Yes.
Excellent. But inform the other party that you will be bringing peer support. It can feel a little bit antagonistic if you walk in with somebody and the provider doesn't know. So, you know, just letting them know that you're going to bring someone. They can't deny it, but just letting them know is really important. And talk to your peer support about what you need from the meeting and how they can best support you. And we kind of talked about that threefold approach. Escalate if necessary, but it is an ideal step. And you've been met with kind of ableist service providers to escalate. You have a legal right to accommodations, and many student unions do have legal representation or legal services. So we can connect people at our university to the ombudsperson. We don't offer legal advice, we're not lawyers, but we can certainly help people, again, connect to the human rights tribunal if necessary, to the ombudsperson, to the Office of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, to their graduate program chair. And again, student government can kind of help with all that to the extent that they're able. But most student governments probably don't have like a lawyer on staff, but they can connect you to legal supports. Additional tips. So self-care is essential to self-advocacy. So prioritize self-care. This doesn't need to be a day at the spa. We're all students here, so spa days are expensive, but it could be a night with friends watching Netflix, having a Netflix party. It could be just reading a book. It could just be having a cup of tea. Honestly, it could just be unplugging for the night. Whatever self-care is to you, do it. Advocacy is a full-time job. One of my colleagues the other day said, being a student with a disability is a full-time job, and it really, truly is. So self-care, super important. Mutual peer support is really empowering. Other students are likely in a similar situation, so finding those groups on campus, or if you don't have them off campus, fun fact, there's lots of resources at needs.ca. Yay! So know your rights when in doubt, and ask your student union or student representative if you're in doubt. And do your research and make sure that you've got tools in your arsenal, in your tool belt. So navigating self-advocacy with collective advocacy. So we've kind of talked about this, but valued presence of disability communities on campus through student unions or other disabled groups is huge. We're stronger together, our voices are bigger together, we're louder together. I sing in a choir, so I kind of feel like the student advocacy and collective advocacy is a bit like a choir. Everybody has a role, and you know it's not quite the same without one person. So when one person drops from the choir or the song, you can tell. But in my experience with collective advocacy, everybody brings a really special and needed part. Students share knowledge and stories, and they can share it with people who just quote unquote get it. They're not explaining every little thing because explaining can get exhausted. And students might rely on peers who were registered with disability services or who are, if they haven't quite decided to take that step yet, to sort of figure out, hey, what's the process and how do I go about this? It's really important to know that not everybody will want to register with accessible learning. So sometimes students who engage in mutual and collective advocacy aren't all necessarily students who are registered with the center. So this is my thank you slide. I hope it is anyway. So this is my thank you slide. Ooh, I hope not close to my, there we go. So at this point I want to open it up for questions. I don't just want to have a conversation about advocacy where I stand up here and talk, because that doesn't feel very authentic. So I just like to open it up for comments or questions or reflections based on what I've shared today or how you're coming to the space today.
I have a question.
Yes, Carly.
Cute. So you've been a student. And you obviously ending your undergrad for your PhD, I'm guessing.
You guessed absolutely correctly. A+ you.
So how did accommodations, like advocating for accommodations, change between undergrad and PhD?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Just fixing my mask, I apologize. So in undergrad, the accommodations were very boilerplate and standard. So I had a note taker. Laurier did have tutoring services at the time. They had accessible textbooks. But then when I got into my master's and PhD, because it's a research stream, there wasn't coursework after the first probably semester. And in my PhD, the first year. So you do your coursework and then you're done. So you don't need a note taker. You don't need, textbooks or extra time for exam. But what you need is research support, because a lot of the databases in the library are not accessible and you need to access those articles. So you need a liaison with your library. You need somebody to assist you at conferences. If you're a scholarship holder, you need someone to help you fill out the inaccessible reports or scholarship applications. You might also need somebody to assist you with publications, because a lot of the journal websites are not accessible. So the problem with that is it's so individualized that, again, that's where I was saying, like, coming to those meetings prepared, but then also being open for discussion is really important. A lot of my accommodations, I work through my thesis advisor, and she and I just kind of make them work together as a unit, because she's really amazing and great. And I found it took me 8 years to find a great thesis advisor, but Colleen is great. So all that to say, we just had a discussion and she opened it with, what do you need to be successful in my lab? But a lot of times that doesn't happen. So I hope that answered your question, at least in part.
Okay, this is the part where we kind of switch up. Thank you everyone for your questions. We are going into a bit of a break.
So welcome back. I hope everyone had a good break. So anyways, I'm now going to invite Meredith Brown to the stage for a presentation on the Dalhousie Accessibility Inclusion Society. And then we're going to have Matt from the Dalhousie Disability Advocacy Society and Lan Keenan from the Schulich Disability Alliance. They taught me how to say that. It took way too many tries.
So sorry.
Like,
Truly an inaccessible.
no. Anyways, I'll invite Meredith up, and then after we're gonna have all three of them on for a panel, and it's gonna be pretty great. Meredith.
Okay, hi.
Yay. Oh, that's a lot of curlies. Oh. All right. You're good. You see the mic.
Hello. I'll just fill the silence.
We just need to get the presentation.
Okay, I'll just riff.
Okay.
It's been a great day so far. I'm really happy to have everyone here gathered together as a community. I am the president of the Dalhousie Accessibility and Inclusion Society, and I have some people with me. Yes! And yeah, so I'll just talk a bit about our society. We're a relatively new society at Dalhousie, so we're just trying to get things going. And we also kind of are struggling with continuity, because we keep sort of, definitely like COVID, the pandemic was difficult to navigate in terms of the society and keep it going and get participation. So we're doing what we can. And we basically exist to help the student community at Dalhousie, disabled students, to get together, to let us know any accessibility and inclusion concerns that they have on campus. And oh, here we are. Yay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's one of our past presidents in that slide. Yeah. So that's us at the society fair. So the society fairs happen in the fall and in the winter again. So hopefully we'll have a table at the Winter Society Expo. And how do I go to the next slide? Is that something I do? So yeah, we're dedicated to improving accessibility services and accessibility in general at Dal. Just some general statistics about Nova Scotia. As a province, we have the highest rate of disability out of every province or territory in Canada, at 30%. That's the latest statistic. 40% of disabled Nova Scotians are unemployed, and university graduation rates are lower for those with a disability in all provinces in Canada. So these are a few of the things that highlight the need for accessibility and support and inclusion in our communities. So that's what our society aims to do. And next slide. So some of the things that we do, we like to try and get some guest speakers in. Last year, we had a speaker from the Disability Rights Coalition of Nova Scotia, someone from the Club Inclusion, someone from Brain Injury Association of Nova Scotia. And we'd love to have students and even faculty come and speak. Next slide. We also collaborate with other societies, specifically the Dalhousie Disability Advocacy Society, which is represented today. We last year did a trivia, which was really successful and really fun. And so that was great. I don't know if I have another slide after this. Probably not.
Woo!
And that's, that's us.
We will now have Matt from the Dalhousie Disability Advocacy Society.
Okay, so hello everyone. My full name is Mateus, but you guys can call me Matt because I'm from Brazil and my name is impronounceable in English. So I go by Matt. And I am the current president of DDAS, Dalhousie Disability Advocacy Society. And fun fact, Meredith is our vice president. So yeah. So this society was not founded by me. It was founded by Sam, which was our previous president, but she's in med school now, so she passed the ropes to me. So we got let's say the main goal for the society is to be like a disabled student common space, right? One thing that I am personally very proud of is that our staff and our staff members and our members in general, like general public, let's say, we like range a lot of types of disabilities. Like it's not focused on one type, right? So every time we talk about it, it's very kind of common grounds. And this is the main goal was the main goal like group wise. And as with Meredith Society, we try to, hear what students are struggling with. And we try to do fun things. Like, for example, the trivia we did together last year. I also, I think it was last year. Yeah, I think it was last year. I did a couple of videos explaining my disability. So there were a couple of, let's say, title cards for the video. So it was like, first, my introduction, how I live day to day. So things you might think I do as a visually impaired person compared to what I actually do, which is very funny because people think we do funny stuff. So yeah, you two know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So again, there are misconceptions that people usually have, like, oh, we're standing in like about to cross the street. Okay, if we are good, if we have our cane, our guide dog, a person with us, we usually don't need people coming in shouting at us saying, okay, it's good to cross, So, stuff like that. Also, one thing I did, which I think it was very cool, I kind of gave two different perspectives on living with disability. So the perspective from a person that lived in Brazil and a perspective of a person that lives in Canada. And this, we try to do like this perspective things, how it is to live with our disabilities, advocate for our disabilities. Every meeting we have. So every meeting, our staff introduces themselves and we talk a bit, like every person talks a bit about, what their disability is and how they got diagnosed with it. Of course, if they are comfortable with it, I don't obligate anyone to talk about their disability. And we actually, me and Meredith, we are trying for next year to merge our societies, because we have very, very similar goals. It's to advocate and make disabled students' life better here at Dal. And also one thing we do that I am very proud of is fundraisers. So we fundraised for CNIB for, I'm not going to remember last year's, Mayor, help me out here. Yeah, exactly. So it was for the Nova Scotia legal thing. And we also try to do these fundraisers with rewards, which is fun. It's always fun to give rewards to people. So like a year we had, I think it was like Sam's friend, she did like kind of brochure dolls and we gave them out to people. We do bake sales here as well. And so the thing to do with DDAS here, we were, to my acknowledgement, and Sam told me this, so if I'm not, wrong if I say this, she's wrong. We were the first disability society of Dalhousie. So like we, me being president, I am trying to like, I don't know if this is a sentence in English, to bigger ourselves, like to make our society more, let's say, impactful, at the university in general. So yeah, this is us, and hopefully next year, me and Meredith, we're going to be in unison with our societies. Will be just one big disability kind of, group thing for every disabled student to come and hang out and talk about disabilities and how the accommodations are not working and all that jazz. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Matt. And I'll invite Lana.
First time I forget my Canadian voices. Oh.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Happy you're included in a room day. It rarely happens. I find at Dalhousie University, the amount of times that I'm in a room with more disabled people than just me is very small. So I very much cherish these moments where I am seen and possibly heard. Everyone can hear me, right? Just confirm. Okay, great. Okay. So yeah, my name is Lan. I'm neurodivergent. I'm queer. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a very disabled law student, and I am struggling, but so is the rest of the law school. So it's not exactly a unique experience. Before Dalhousie, I attended the University of Guelph, and I majored in political science and philosophy there, and then realized that there was no way in hell I could graduate. So I ran away, literally, to St. Thomas University in New Brunswick, where I was accepted with open arms from a loving professor who was friends with the professor I had at Guelph. He took me in and all of my credits because my credits were in like every single department and I did not follow any sort of syllabus or procedural line of study, which Guelph does not like. Interdisciplinary studies are not understood there. Well, apparently now they are, but not at my time. And so I ran away to New Brunswick. I graduated from St. Thomas University during a pandemic with a 4.0 GPA. Because imagine if you let people with disabilities actually thrive in hybrid learning spaces, they actually do okay. Imagine. So the entire time I was in university, I asked for accommodations such as being able to attend classes when I was ill online. And the university continued to, until the day I graduated, say, we're not able to do that. We're not able to do that is their favorite words. And then COVID happened. And within like 2 weeks, they were able to do that. Not for me, but for the entirety of the world, which was a big slap in the face. And that is when I joined Twitter, because that's the disabled community on Twitter is very much my favorite people. And they were all screaming the same thing, which was, we have been asking for this for years. And we had this feeling that COVID would come and somewhat go. And universities would not acknowledge that they just deleted all of our accommodations that they had given everyone. And that is very much where I stand today. So as the president of the Disability Alliance at Dalhousie Law School, the law school forgot that they could run hybrid model classes. They forgot that they could accommodate disabled students, and they just keep forgetting things. It's like they don't have several administrators. And it's not just the law school, it is the entirety of Dalhousie University. So although I'm working specifically within the law school, it does not restrict me from seeing the suffering that is going on around me. So yeah, specifically about our organization, the Schulich Disability Alliance, grew from the ashes of the pandemic. My friend Jim Gavin, and vice president, he very much started the society after having appendicitis and not being able to go to classes, and the law school wanted him to get a doctor's note, and he was like in the hospital and then like in the toilet and like not able, like he was like, I'm not going to the doctor right now, like you can come see my wounds. So that year Jim successfully abolished the medical note policy at the law school. Yeah. Go Jim. That is the last success we've had. No, I'm just kidding. Well, kind of. We're struggling. So as you probably know, and if you don't know, you don't go to Dow, we have an accessibility center, as most universities do, although I would like to say that it is not like most universities. It's trash. It is not an accessible accessibility center. I've never been in the ominous center that they speak of because of COVID. And every time I have an exam there, it gets canceled due to a flood or a COVID or random other things that the law school does. No plague yet. So just kidding. Yeah, so sorry. The law school's been facing a lot of issues that are not related to the pandemic, but are related to other things. Like, for example, last year our building flooded, and so the whole semester last year, I'm screaming at the law school because they're not accommodating my accommodations, which are I need some sort of recording of classes that I'm not able to attend. That's not fair to them. So I'm only able to record classes I'm there for, and it's me who's recording them. My computer hates that. My computer crashes so much because of recording things that I'm not supposed to be recording technically. And then on top of that, the burden is on me to attend the classes I'm not able to attend and record them. So that's really bad. And then it got worse because I started getting sick more and more as I do, and unable to attend classes. And then we didn't have note takers last year. The entire student body was burnt out. And so the onus being on students to volunteer to take notes was, it failed. And we became in a crisis because nobody had the notes. I stole them from University of Victoria, but let's not talk too much about that. I wish I was there. Yeah, so the law school is struggling for everyone. And so at the very end of the year, me and several other organizations within the law school took note of what was going on, and we published a 32-page document and sent it to everybody. Literally, we sent it to every accommodation advisor at Dalhousie University. We sent it to the deans. We promptly did not receive a response from any of them. But I just wanted to kind of go over very briefly the things that we figured out last year. So these are the concerns from anonymous feedback forms that we received like 30 of, which is honestly a really big number when you're running a thing 2 weeks before final exams. So these are some of the concerns about accommodations at DAL, specifically at our law school. So student feedback included concerns about receiving responses about appointments or responses from the Accessibility Center in general. Literally a lack of therefore. Like no one answers their emails, especially this time of year, because Dalhousie at large is huge, right? And there are not a huge amount of accommodation people. So specifically for law school, we pay $22,000 a year in tuition and $22,000 a year in tuition. And they don't respond to our emails. So yeah, it's not very accessible, especially when I'm currently on a leave or a break. Everyone's calling it something different. Nobody has told me how I'm supposed to complete my semester. I refuse to drop out because I've paid 11. I don't want to do that math. I've paid too much money to be here to not be able to finish the semester. But they won't tell me how. They haven't responded to any of my emails regarding exam deferrals or accommodation deferrals or accommodation extensions. So, and all of my accommodations say that I can have these things. So legally, you'd think the law school would be good at that, but they're not. And they're not for anyone. So students are also concerned about getting extra time for exams, being excluded from extra time during exams due to wanting to write them in the class, or not being able to write them outside of the class, or having to write them on a shitty software that will crash when you bring a screen reader to it. Fun times!
I love when that happens. Can we make that happen today?
Can we? Yeah, let's just crash everyone's computers and then say that that's it's actually just, it's the pedagogy. That's the reason. So yeah, a few others that I'd just like to highlight quickly. Clarification on how to appeal accommodation decisions are void. There is no clarification as to how you appeal something, specifically not for the student body at large, although of course if you have friends on DSAS or other organizations, they can sometimes help you through it. SAC advisors do not receive training with regards to how to read medical notes, how to read psychologist diagnoses, what it means when you have medical documentation and how they have to implement such. They're confused. People are receiving terrible feedback. People are receiving terrible insults and like really discriminative language and behaviors coming from university admin at the law school and also the accessibility office in general. Hybrid learning has been shut down and it is like a bad word, the H word. The law school administration refuses to acknowledge that anything can be hybrid, which is awful. They will not give closed captioning during anything, which is awful. And anytime there are online exams, they are just awful. They really don't want to accommodate online exams, online learning, and they don't want to accommodate with an online exam when it could be useful. So these are some of the things we're working on. As we are not the fun group. We are like not that anyone is having fun at university, but we definitely are way more varied than we should be. But we have some people with spoons, which is great. We share the spoons. That is, thank you for having me. Sorry, that ended up being kind of a rant. Apologies.
I like it so much. Yeah. If you want, just like take a seat.
I'll invite Meredith and Matt to also come up for the panel. And Katya Newman, of course. All right, Katya, take it away.
So to get started, Meredith, you've kind of done this, but please tell us a little bit about yourself and your student group.
Sure. Hi, my name is Meredith. Yeah, I am a first year student in occupational therapy at Dalhousie. Just, you know, in the middle of the struggle. Yeah, doing it. Yeah, and I'm currently president of the Dalhousie Accessibility and Inclusion Society, VP of DDAS, the accessibility coordinator for Dal ASL, And is that it? Ooh, might be. I don't know.
That's good. And Matt, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your society?
Sure. So my name is Matt. I am a psychology student here at Dal. I am the current president of the DAIS, Dalhousie Disability Advocacy Society. I am a recurring, let's say, volunteer for CNIB. So I do a lot of speaking there and mentoring. I've also done speaker roles back in Brazil. I actually done four speeches, let's say, in schools, in high schools in Brazil, back in like May, June, August. So it was 2 on May, 1 June, 1 August. Yeah, I think that's it actually. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And Lynn, telling us a little bit about yourself and your society.
Yeah, so my name's Lan. As you all just heard, I am the president of the Disability Alliance at the Schulich School of Law. I'm a 2L, so one in theory. I have 1 year left of law school, 1.5 years left. They let me out. They might not let me out. We'll see. And I have physical and mental disabilities. I got a bucket of them, and they all are in flare right now. So thank you for having me. Sorry if I'm the best.
Thank you for showing up.
This is something I actually didn't tell, but I think it's important. Sorry, I didn't disclose my disability. I have a vision disability. I have 20% of a non-impaired person. So I basically see everything blurred out. Kind of like, you know, when you take a shower and the bathroom fogs up, kind of like that. So, and like I have kind of a fish-eyed vision, so I don't see far away. I see kind of like a GoPro, you know, kind of more peripheral vision. So yeah.
So we'll go on to the second question. Meredith, can you tell us a little bit about what's been your biggest accomplishment in terms of self-advocacy on campus so far?
Good question. Also, full disclosure, I didn't like fully prepare for this, but I'm doing my best. So, okay, well,
Take it as an individual or as a society, just throwing out ideas.
yeah. I just recently, I joined the equity committee, which is part of the OT school, and it's separate from, it's not like faculty oriented or admin oriented or anything like that. And it felt really good. I went to the meeting and it was full of students who had a lot of concerns about accessibility. And yeah, it felt good to know that I wasn't alone. And so I think that was a success, and I'm proud of attending that and voicing my concerns.
Totally. And Matt, your biggest accomplishment in the area of advocacy on campus so far?
So I think society-wise were the videos I was able to make last year, because like it wasn't available like just for the society people. There on Instagram, like anybody can watch it. And I think this is, you know, cool because I am giving, you know, my perspectives on things that I see personally that a lot of people don't give their perspectives on. And individually, I am a very, very picky person. Like when it comes to, I always, and I've done this all my life, I have to thank my mom and dad for teaching me this. I always told everyone that I meet that like one of the first things I tell people about me is about my vision, because I don't want to get in a situation that I am, kind of busted for people not knowing that I can't see something. So every prof I've ever had here, thank God they were all like nice about it. But every prof in the beginning of the term, kind of like how Elizabeth said, kind of book a time with them, or if they're like never available, just go up to them in the end of the class. Always say, so just so you know, my name is Matt. I am with the Accessibility Center. You don't have the time, so I'm here. I'm standing here telling you, and then I explain what I just told you guys about my disability.
Very cool. And Lan, your biggest self-advocacy accomplishment on campus so far?
Accomplishments. Yeah, there's a lot of struggles these days, but accomplishments is I suppose like coming to the university, I was very energetic before I got here. I called the accessibility office, as I do every time I go to a new university. I told them what I needed, and I was really clear about it. And I didn't really let them say no. Like there was nothing in my accessibility plan that they could legally say no to, and I knew that. So I guess like starting the school and like telling the advisor that they needed to, accommodate me, and then being able to sort of like reaffirm that regularly, and get my psychiatrist is wonderful, and he'll just like write down anything I say and sign it. So that's pretty much all I've been doing for like months, is just like re-advocating for myself constantly in order to like assure that when situations like this year have arise, that I'm like, I already have the support I need for when I'm about to like go off the deep end, which I can't always see coming. And I guess like one of the biggest things that we've been pushing for, and I'm pretty proud of, is a restructuring of the private policies that are in place at this university regarding disability. Specifically, like the law school prevents students from doing what you just said, which is going up to your professor and disclosing your disability and telling them that like the accessibility office doesn't work and that you need help. The law school prohibits that because it's a type of self-disclosure you're not allowed to do. And if I am like a disabled student writing about disabilities, I can't disclose that in a paper either, because it could lead to self-disclosure in my grades. So there are like really strong private policies that are from like the 80s, when disability was shamed upon. And if someone was disabled at law school, which they weren't, but if they were, then like lawyers and your professors wouldn't be able to discriminate against you because of it. So like they had good intentions in the 80s. We are in 2022, unfortunately for us.
23.
And those policies are still in place, and it's just like a cultural and public awareness around disability. It's like, it's no longer, we shouldn't be ashamed. Like we should be able to just like stand up and be ourselves and like ask for what we need. So those barriers are still in place, but I am proud of the work we're doing to fight them, or try to figure out how to even propose a restructure of those types of policies. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to the third question. Meredith, what have been some of the barriers you've faced in individual or group advocacy?
That is a giant question. I mean, it's impossible to even approach. I don't even know how I would. Yeah. Let's see.
What do you mean?
I hate to, I'm the
What-
first
what-
person who has to answer all these questions.
No. What? Just go with what comes to mind.
My mind is blank.
You could definitely skip. Like I can
Maybe,
find
yeah,
you, but-
maybe.
Me
I'll-
too.
I'll
Yeah,
go after you.
I can start as well.
Okay,
So for me, one of the biggest, I guess, struggles for me was not being explained anything. So like when I moved here, I already mentioned this. In Brazil, we don't have accessibility centers. So like when I moved to Dalhousie, I didn't know what an accessibility center was. I didn't know their function. I didn't know like why they were there, basically. I knew they were a thing, and my dad wanted me to talk to them, but I didn't know why specifically. So like for me, the biggest struggle, and I am thankful that this is my biggest struggle, because I know a lot of other disabled students have much, much bigger ones than this, was I had to, basically for my first year, like 2018, 2019, I had to retest basically every accommodation on the cheat sheet to see what worked for me, because no one like came to me and said, so if you choose this, this is what's going to happen. If you choose that, that's what's going to happen. If you choose it, so for me, this was kind of a iffy thing, because we are students, we have assignments, we have quizzes, we have tests, we have exams, we have a gazillion things going on at the same time, and we don't necessarily have the time to do this retest things, because it's kind of like if I do bad on an exam due to a wrong accommodation, I'm not able to retake that exam. Like the prof is not going to be like, oh, no big, you just retake it. That's kind of, I understand it's not fair because I did, bad on the exam, but at the same time, it wasn't 100% my fault. It was just because I wasn't able to do it the best way, that I would be able to do it if I had the correct thing going on. So it took a bit of time, like, to sort it out, like my kind of ingredients, let's say, for my accommodations.
Very cool.
Could you repeat the question?
The question is, what are the biggest barriers you faced in individual or group advocacy?
All right, barriers, structural barriers, first off, I'd say are like the biggest problem here. You have an accessibility center. You have, like, for me, you have a law school administration who is an autonomous blob who take no accountability for anything they do, but also are willing to like take credit for anything that people under them do. And then you have the accessibility services, which is great. And like undergraduate accessibility accommodations, I think are pretty streamlined. They should be pretty streamlined by now. Like every university in Canada has undergraduate accommodations, and undergraduate programs, for the most part, like function. And from what I've seen, like Dalhousie is obviously going to have some problems with their undergraduates, but you see the same problems. Whereas when you do get to higher education, you're in your graduate programs, you're in PhD programs, you're in law programs, doctorate programs, dentistry, engineering, things get way more complicated, because it's not this like go to lecture and like take notes and then like write your exam in December and then like everything is going to be okay. You can have your accommodations like pretty much streamlined. No, like you're right. Like they don't explain anything, and they also don't give you like a menu of like all the things you can have. Yeah, you have to like ask. It's like if you went to a restaurant and you weren't given a menu and you also had no idea what they served, but they wanted you to order before you had to place your order, and then anytime you ask for something they don't have, they just say, no, we don't have that. And then you just like have to keep asking and asking, and eventually you say like avocado sushi and they're like, we have that. And you're like, excellent, I'll take 800 of those. But that's really how the accessibility accommodation system works here. And it's even worse when you have to like factor in really complicated like exams and things that are like so specific, and like the reason that you can't write it is so specific. It's like this individualistic model. And one of the biggest problems with the individual model of disability is that these conversations don't happen frequently. Like I can't say like, oh, Jim, like I'm so grateful I have a Jim because he's great. But having a Jim that's been like, he didn't have half of the accommodations I had the year I got to the law school, and he went, oh, you have this, and like you have this, I don't have any of this. And he took my letter of accommodation to the accommodation center and went, what the hell? Like, I don't have any of these. You didn't give me this. And they're like, you didn't ask for it. And he's like, that shouldn't be my job. So yeah, having accessibility advisors that are like specific to the needs of the people that they are advising would be wonderful. And why a law school can't fund an entire human being at the Accessibility Center confuses me to no end. And why we can't have like better facilitation between programs also drives me crazy. But these are some of the group administrative barriers that are causing havoc, because essentially to get an accommodation approved at the law school, it not only has to go through the Accessibility Center, but it also has to go through the law school administration, the academic student committee, the academic staff student committee, which is like the academic board, and then it has to go through the liaison person between the law school and the Accessibility Center. And due to privacy reasons, none of the people at the law school can hear who I am, like my personhood. So they can't go, it's Lan. Everyone knows Lan. Let's help Lan. None of them say that. The student with the disability that we can't disclose.
Numbers, basically.
Yeah, like literally numbers. We're dehumanized and we're put in front of them like they don't say what disability I have or why I'm requesting the accommodation or who I am, but they say a student with a disability needs this accommodation, and it regularly gets rejected or questioned. And I'm not there in the room to like fight for myself. And this drives me nuts. So thank you. That is my problem.
If I can just like say something about what you just said, this is something I also find is very, very iffy, is the individual aspect of each person's disability. I can assure you, I know 3 people in this room with vision disabilities. We all do things different. We need different accommodations. It's not like it shouldn't be like end all be all accommodations for everyone. You know, again, with the advisors, we should have people properly trained to talk to us and see what we need in the individual level, not like the corporate, oh, it's the student with the disability level. And this is also something it's very, very, I don't know, trash here. So yeah.
Dehumanizing trash.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Meredith?
Hello. Yeah, just to add to Lan's like menu analogy. So that is very true. That's my experience. That's the experience of every single student that I've talked to about getting accommodations. It's very much you ask for something and then they will reply with, well, we don't have that. And then you look at the meal that your associate has been given and you say, yes, you do. They just got it. And it's, you know, how did you get, well, it's on the secret menu, right? That shouldn't be happening. There's also a lot of lack of accountability happening on a lot of levels. This is something everyone wants to pass it on to someone else. So if you try to, you know, go to the Accessibility Center and have them take accountability or responsibility for, you know, anything, they'll say it's because they're not funded enough. They're not prioritized in terms of, you know, getting enough resources from the university. That's fine. We understand that as students. We understand you're overworked, but also take some accountability in your role in things, because you do have a role in this. And you can't escape your ableism just by virtue of being an accessibility advisor, by virtue of being part of that center. You need to check yourself and check your ableism. And I don't see that happening, to be honest. Also, just to touch on the OT school, what's that, a piece, 2 minutes? Oh, okay. Within the OT school specifically, I came into it thinking, oh, it's occupational therapy. You know, they do accommodations. That's their thing.
They must be.
I thought this is, I won't have, you know, this will will be great for me. That didn't happen at all. It's been a struggle every step of the way. And I have limited sources of energy. We all have limited sources of energy to advocate for ourselves. We often feel like we can't advocate for ourselves because it reflects badly on us. It will affect us academically and in our careers. So I'm constantly mindful of that. And just as someone with just a variety of disabilities, oftentimes invisible, they're not understood. And yeah, there's a lot of just misunderstanding and judgment going on. So that's just touching on a few of the barriers.
All very good points. So we have 2 questions left, and just as a bit of context, we have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to try to keep each to about 5 minutes. So we will give you a break, Meredith. Maybe we'll switch over to Lan's end of the row. But the next question we have is how can campus COVID measures better include and respond to the needs of students with disabilities? So maybe you can tell us like one thing each.
Hybrid learning.
Let me try.
Let me pull up all of the articles I've written for the internet over the last 7 months. Hybrid learning is something I've wanted and dreamed of for a very long time. It is something that was so impossible to receive in high school. I did all of my work from like either my hospital bed or my partner's bed in high school. Like I didn't go to classes because you can't sit in a room full of like 32 hormonal teenagers and be autistic and have ADHD and have celiac disease and be on the toilet at the same time. It's just impossible. Yeah, especially the being on the toilet part. COVID brought me this like luxury, which is that I could be in the bathtub or on the toilet or both and still be in class and attending and like actually listening to my lectures most of the time, which was an incredible experience. And then that just like disappeared. I literally had a 4.0 GPA during the pandemic, just like never happened in my life. And I had it because I was able to attend from like the comfort of my home where my sensory life is. And like I have autistic heaven at my apartment. Anyone who would like to join anytime. Like I have cats now. Like, you know, things that really help me as a human being to like function on a day-to-day basis, like not having to commute to an inaccessible campus through an inaccessible bus route on an inaccessible street. Oh, and then Halifax also has this thing called winter that the municipality takes no responsibility for, and our sidewalks don't work for half the year. So as someone who has like mobility problems, trying to get to campus, to get to a class at 10 a.m. when there's rush hour and the snow plows just decided not to work and the buses are all delayed. It's like, why can't I attend this class from my bedroom? Truly, especially because of students with disabilities most of us live in poverty on a good day, and accessibility living and buildings with, let's say, a luxury such as an elevator costs, 30% more. So I have to live in the middle of nowhere, Nova Scotia, with an elevator, and I pay like double most of my law students pay here in the city, inner city, but they take stairs. And then, yeah, I can't get to class on time. And so like COVID comes and relieves everyone of the burden of life. And people are upset that they can't be in class. And I understand, because I actually do love sitting in front of a professor and like staring them down and like making them understand that like disability is real and like gender bias is real. Like I love those interactions. I love standing in front of people. I mean, I'm here, right, in person, but sometimes I need to be on the fucking toilet. I do, truly, as a disabled person. I need to be on a toilet. I need to be on preferably a gender neutral toilet. Sometimes I take a bush. Like it doesn't matter to me, but like the reality is the school's absolute destruction of a hybrid model and their absolute denial of a hybrid model is destroying the lives of the disabled community at Dalhousie University and putting us at risk.
I totally agree. And like my big issue with this. Thank God I live very close by, like I live 20 minutes walking distance from here. But my big gripe is with exams. It's not like the thing, I like to cheat on exams because I like open book exams and whatever. Like half of the time, if I try to read something during an exam, I'm not going to be able to finish the exam because I read very slow. It's more of the thing that I think that people that got, let's say, acquainted with the hybrid learning, and especially COVID learning that it was everything online. Every student here in Gal, at least in the psych department, did better on exams. Like this isn't a statistic. Like this was I don't remember who published it, but it's a fact. We did better on exams just because we didn't have the pressure of sitting, among 500 people doing the same thing. And for me, even being a visually disabled student, doing an exam with a reader is much better than me trying to read the paper exam. Having a screen reader that I can adjust the velocity to like 2 times because I can hear, better than most people, thank God, just makes me do better on exams. And it's not cheating. It's not nothing. Like I'm not doing anything that shouldn't be done, just accommodating for my accommodations. And this is done. This is done. I've never done an online exam since last year, maybe early last year. I don't know. So this is a struggle. And even the snow thing, again, currently I use a cane. Walking with a cane on a snowing day is not fun. There's many falls to happen. The floor is slippery, and it sometimes happens that you fall and your cane kind of runs off of your hand. And then you need to try to find the cane tapping the floor, and it's not fun. Yeah. So again, like Len said, being able to attend class, not, dealing with all that would be much appreciated here. So yeah.
What about you, Meredith?
Zoom on.
Okay. Well, we'll go to the last question then, and I'll leave it open to whoever can come up with an answer. To go first, you can shuffle. So what could the province of Nova Scotia do to support disability rights and equity-seeking groups?
I'm gonna give this one to you.
I got
You're
this.
the lost
Oh my gosh, I got this. I wrote this out. Here we go. Ready? I'm gonna read this. So just bear with me. I wrote this for the government and I sent it to them. I sent it to all of them. Like every single MP received a direct message and an email. Okay, so this is the input from my organization. Problems mentioned in this email are real problems causing real students with real disabilities distress. Our Alliance would like these concerns to be heard as a common barrier faced with people with disabilities are experiencing these. So this is my list. I would like to bring this point to attention of the third reading of this bill. So I'm talking about the disability bill that is currently going to Parliament. It's a fucking nightmare. I have attended 3 universities over my career as a disabled student. I work alongside students with multiple disabilities, students who independently are supporting their partners with disabilities, students who have permanent disabilities, live in poverty, students who have permanent disabilities and cannot access adequate physical or emotional care for treatments of their disabilities or related sickness. Further, another group of people who are often left out of these discussions and who are more struggling are former students who have either had to leave post-secondary education due to the lack of professional care, financial support, or security pertaining to their life with disabilities, and students who are pushed through, finally graduate out of their program with a disability and become stuck. I personally have witnessed this more times than I can count. People who made it through their educational programs and then as graduates become stuck in a system. They often can no longer access medical services on campus because they're no longer students. They can't receive the emotional care they were formerly receiving because they're no longer students at their university. They can no longer qualify for student insurance benefits, often resulting in a lapse of medication refills that they can no longer receive and they never sought after again. To the length of time before these students can access a proper health caregiver, students who have graduated university and then have a flare-up of disability symptoms often lose immediate job prospects, are unable to secure postgraduate employment, a lack of financial aid for students who are formerly students, relief programs for young peoples with disabilities, and a lack of any emergency financial support programs shows a huge inadequacy in the social services that are committed to improving the lives of those with permanent disabilities in Canada. Huge population of people with students with disabilities are being forgotten in all provincial and federal bureaucratic processes requiring to support people with disabilities. So these are small problems if you look at individuals, but when you look across the country, these are huge problems that are not willing to be tackled by any of the provincial or federal governments that are creating the restrictions in the first place.
Very powerful words.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, let's give it up. All right, thank you everyone for that panel. Okay, so with that, first off, thank you so much. One of my favorite things about the tour so far, and it's only the second stop, so I don't know if this is fair enough to say, but it's finding out the state of the schools. I'm so sorry. But for real, like, they're called service providers, not service deniers. So please know that NEADS knows, NEADS cares, and NEADS is going to give them a damn hard time because this is unacceptable. So, you know, it's about the friends we make along the way. Anyways, we are now going to start some student presentations, which is super exciting. So we're going to start with Karen Tang, who we had for our grad studies panel a few months ago. She was incredible. Glad to have you back. And then we'll have Alper present, and then finally Matt again. I'm so excited to hear a bit more from Dalhousie students. So Karen, come on up to the stage. Yeah, clapping. Okay, Karen.
Yeah. Oh my God, I have to I'm short. So
Are you good to move it?
yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, awesome. So hi everyone, my name is Karen Tang. My pronouns are she, her. I am currently a PhD student in clinical psychology at Dalhousie. So I am training to become a clinical psychologist, meaning I try to take my lived experience with disability into my clinical approach. In terms of my disabilities, I get chronic migraines and vertigo. I have a physical disability that does impact my thumb, so it's a little bit harder to take notes when I'm in a clinical session. And I recently, I'm post-concussion 1 year, so that's kind of messed things up within my program. So today I kind of talk about disability advocacy and justice, kind of outside of Dalhousie, including mainly building your community as well as advocating for your needs. So a lot of my disability advocacy has been in EDIA, so equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, but kind of outside of Dalhousie. So I am really active on Twitter. The land we need to connect. And a lot of my EDIA and advocacy there has just been around increasing awareness around disability, as well as mental health is included in mental health challenges can be included in disability, and how we can kind of increase awareness around that. So one thing I always mention is to try to build your community. Like, we know that having a disability can be a very lonely and challenging path. So I really do encourage you to try to find your people, try to people that uplift you, who provide a sense of community and belonging, including in allies. So I've been really lucky in that I have found a really good thesis supervisor. You've heard several stories today that hasn't always been the case. I do try to encourage you to build your community. I'll also shout out academic Twitter has been fantastic in terms of connecting with other people. Like several of you have mentioned today, I've also never been in a room full of so many people that have similar or likewise experiences like me. So I've had to reach out and kind of go the online route and connect with others on Twitter. And I do encourage everyone to connect with each other here, because this is a fantastic way to build your community. And so in terms of advocating for your needs, Elizabeth already did a really good job with her keynote speech about that. But I think one thing to kind of keep in mind is that you can have both short-term and long-term accommodations. So I am registered with Student Accessibility Services for more of like the migraine and my physical disability. But I was in a car crash a year ago in October and actually got a traumatic brain injury. So I did suffer a concussion. So that meant I had to take medical leave for like 3 months. And I also had to connect with both my department chair as well as Student Accessibility Services to kind of discuss and determine the best way we could kind of move about in terms of short-term accommodations. So I was really lucky, I had a really good advisor, but we were able to figure out different specific accommodations that could work for me for each course that I had. So that is also an option. I also always advocate for you to try to find your voice, but that in turn requires both self-care and balance. So for example, I do a lot of advocacy online, but at times that can be really draining, right? We only have so many spoons. So I've had to kind of decline working on committees right now within the Department of Psychology, unfortunately, just because I don't have enough spoons right now to do my advocacy there, but I do more advocacy like virtually, that's a bit more accessible for me, things like that. So trying to just really find your balance and ensure you're kind of taking care of yourself in the same time. And lastly, I always end up with, you need to pick and choose your battles. Like this, again, these are like systemic barriers that we are trying to take down. At the same time, you really do need to take care of yourself. So if you do need to take a step back and kind of nourish yourself, that's okay too. Just keep in mind that like your time and your energy is quite limited, and it's okay to kind of take a step back and take care of yourself. Okay, thank you.
But today I'll be talking about some common problems in research with the autistic community, which is relevant not only to the disabled community, but also to the Dalhousie community, because these problems occur in our own Autism Research Center. But a little bit about myself. My name is Alper. People usually rhyme it with pair, if that helps. They, them pronouns. I'm a third-year undergrad student doing a double major in sociology and psychology. So I do lack the experience with the ins and outs of the research business, but I think I make up for that with my knowledge and a big special interest in research methods and ethics, as well as being autistic myself and having lived experience. So yeah, next slide. I'm not sure. Oh. So a little bit about autism. So for autistic people ourselves, here's a quote from the Self-Advocacy Network. So this is a very autistic definition of autism that kind of points out that it is to do with how we experience the world and how we process it. And of course, this difference in processing leads to some difference in behavior, which is unfortunately what is focused on by psychology and psychiatry, just because of the heavily behaviorist approach. So they often point out, oh, abnormal ways of socializing, communication, repetitive behavior, restricted or intense interests, differences in sensory interests or reactions, rather than why these things happen and what they mean for the person and how the person experiences them, whether they're distressing, harmful in any way or not. So next slide, please. So since the focus is on this abnormal behavior, the question becomes, oh, well, how do we fix the behavior? Which brings us to the first kind of main area of problem in research, which is the topics of choice. The first one is, as I mentioned, kind of how we fix this behavior, which is often, at least in Nova Scotia, something called early intensive behavioral intervention therapies. And a lot of research focuses on these kinds of behavioral intervention therapies as well. I have a quote from a publication from our own Autism Research Center here, and some of the behaviors they focus on are communication skills, play skills, and aggressive behavior. And rather than asking, well, are these communication skills and play skills bad in some way, or why these aggressive behaviors occur, rather than that, they point out that these are abnormal, these just don't happen often. So they seek learning operant and conditioning learning, classical conditioning to train these children into masking these behaviors, which of course doesn't address the distress behind that. It doesn't take into consideration the comfort of these children. And yeah, and another topic of research is genetic research, which and broadly looking for a cause of autism, which up until recently, this has been framed as looking for a cure for autism, but with backlash from the autistic community and a better understanding of autism showing that you can't really cure it, and even if you could somehow remove autism from an autistic person, they would cease to be themselves. And so they had to change the wording to kind of cure from just cause, which makes me wonder, well, then why are we doing it if we're not seeking a cure or something? And I read through a recent study that's in press right now, that is Why Autism Speaks. And if you know anything about Autism Speaks, that's a red flag. And this involved some researchers from our own Autism Research Center, and which is also funded by Autism Speaks. You might be interested in, but yeah, I read through it wondering, why are we doing this? Why is this being funded? And it seems to be just knowledge for the sake of it. So I'm just curious, why don't we put this funding into research that actually benefits autistic people? Next slide. And the second main area of problems in research is research methods used. The most glaring one for me is the lack of input from participants. Of course, these participants are often children because an overwhelming majority of autism research is done with autistic children. But these children still have valuable input on their stress levels, on their comfort, on how they think and feel, and things like that. They may be able to communicate in different levels depending on their age and disability, but they can still communicate important things. But I looked into two studies, first one being the one I mentioned before, the early intensive behavioral intervention therapy study from our own Autism Research Center, which is a pretty intensive study. Like on average, it took 10 hours from these kids for this study for weeks or months on end, with no check-in with these kids, from what I could see, or how they were doing, whether they were stressed as a result of this, whether they were comfortable with the study. But guess what? Guess whose stress they checked? The parents. There was a parent stress metric, but nothing about the children's stress, mental health condition, comfort, nothing like that. And another study that was pretty glaring was a sibling relationship study. I'm going to quickly read the title of this study, and if you notice something about it, examining clinical characteristics of autism and links with parents' perception of sibling relationship quality. What you might not be able to tell from the title is that this is a study with children. They didn't bother to mention it in the title because that's just the assumption with autism. But moving on. This sibling study, you might expect that they ask these autistic children and their siblings, oh, how's your relationship with your sibling? Or something like that, whether you play, whether you spend time, how do you feel about them? Nothing like that. The only metric taken was parent observations, nothing else. And that brings us to the second point in problems with research methods, which is that these metrics are not designed with autistics in mind or broadly disabled people in mind, but in the specific research, the questionnaire they used for parents to assess their children's relationships was made in a 1985 study, which just did not involve autistic children in any way. It was built for just autistic children, which is kind of assumed standard. And so it doesn't take into account the fact that autistic people show affection in different ways, different expressions of warmth, cold, different ways of spending time. None of this is taken into account. Next slide, please. So to me, the problem and the solution comes from, well, the problem comes from a lack of community involvement, and it can only be solved by community involvement. So the TCPS, which is the authority on how research is done in Canada, well, a lot of research is done in Canada, does have guidelines on how research should be done when it involves Indigenous peoples, and says that it should be participatory research. So it should have input from those communities for good reason, because there's a history of just horrible practices. And so there's this whole chapter on how to take into account the community's needs and how not to do a research that would further stigmatize an already stigmatized group. So while that's great that there is one for research involving Indigenous peoples, it just goes to highlight the lack thereof for other stigmatized groups, including disabled people. And the autistic community has made themselves available for this kind of participatory research. For example, Autism Self-Advocacy Network have put out their services for consultants as a community, and have made community demands for research topics such as better understanding of autism, accessible environments, housing, supportive structures, access to government programs, assistive technologies, communication software, etc. So all of that is to say, autism research should be for the benefit of autistic people. So next slide. Any questions? Do we have time for that? Okay, no questions.
Good. That's all good. All right, I'll now, sorry, I'll let you through. Anyways, I will invite Matt up to the stage to get started. Have at it.
There you go.
All right.
So, hello again, everyone. My name is Matt. I'm going to be more specific about my disability now. So, I have a vision disability, as I told many times. My disability is very, very rare. So from my dad's research and my own research on it, 1% of visually impaired or disabled people in the world have the same, like, let's say, pull of things wrong with their eyes as I do. So what I do have is malformation of my retinas. So my retinas are degenerating. So imagine a ball and like a piece of plastic covering that ball. The ball is your eye, the piece of plastic is the retina. Imagine if the piece of plastic is like peeling off. This is my vision. So I am at risk for it ripping like all off, and if that happens, I'll turn completely blind. This hasn't happened, and my vision disability in general is very strange because I was born with less vision than I have today. So I actually got better. No medical explanation. My ophthalmologist says this to me every time we meet. It's like, you're such an interesting case. I've never seen this happen before. And I go like, this is cool. Like maybe there's a study to be done on me, to understand what's going on. So throughout my life, since I was 3 months old, I was diagnosed with my vision disability when I was 3 months old. My family, thank God, had a very open conversation, let's say, way of dealing with me. So whenever I would ask something or people would ask something to me or to them about my disability, there was never kind of a sidestepping thing. It was very, my parents taught me to, every time someone says something or I have the opportunity to say something, say it. It's better for people to know. This is, my mom always tells me that, she tells me this to this day, and I'm 23 years old. So she always tells me, Machi. It's the way people pronounce my name in Portuguese. It's better for people to know. If you're in a room and maybe only one person, that's enough. If something happens, a person is going to be there. They're going to be able to help you. I go like, you go, Mom. I agree with you 100%. And this to me was kind of a big shock when I came to Canada. When I started working at CNIB, one of the reasons why they gave me a speaker role was because of this, because of my kind of openness to talk about my disability, which is, you know, something very important. Many people came up here to talk about this already, and I'm here, so +1, I guess. So the thing is, I notice that specifically, again, impaired people and job applications, many of the, let's say, topics that CNIB wanted me to talk about was disclosing your disability in your job interviews and, you know, talking to your boss, your colleagues, whatever, about it, you know, so they understand what you go through and, you know, how things work with you. And one thing that really, I guess, showed me a contrast on this, I remember this to this day. I was giving a speech, it was during COVID time, so it was everything online. And one guy, I don't even remember his name. He's like, he was like 50-ish years old. He mentioned a story that he went to work at a supermarket and the boss told him that he had never worked with a disabled person before. This employee was his first disabled employee. And he wanted to know, you know, the best way he could help him and, you know, navigate, you know, kind of provide any accessibility, any accommodations that he would need. And he, which I'm gonna, you know, say it here, he asked him if he needed help to go to the washroom. This guy is 100% blind, and the employer, again, had no experience dealing with any types of disabilities. And he asked, I imagine out of goodwill, it wasn't to mock anyone, he asked if he would need help to go to the washroom. And this guy told everyone that he was so, I think he used the word flabbergasted about this question, that he dropped that job that day and never went back to that supermarket. And I was kind of in a tight spot because I needed to kind of, you know, answer back to him. And I understand that if someone, if a random person goes up to you and asks you, so, you need help going to the washroom? You need help going pee? No, you know, you're gonna feel kind of, why are you asking me this? But at the same time, and this is the point I pointed to him, could you just like have said, no, I don't, and explained why you don't? He was like, oh, but this is no, not how it's supposed to work. And I'm like, okay, I understand this. I understand it. Maybe he could have had worded that question in a different way, but you, as the disabled, you could have said something. You could have educated him for him never, like maybe never to ask that type of question again. And this for me is is one of the best examples of we having the opportunity to tell someone and explain how things work, and we just not doing it. Because in the end of the day, it's on us, right? We can expect, and we should expect, the Accessibility Center, Dalhousie, Nova Scotia, Canada, the entire world to understand us, right? We should have the ability to explain things to them and have them be like, okay, I understand you, I got you, let's help you out, let's, accommodate you. But we need to start the talking. If we don't say things to them, we cannot also kind of like expect them to guess, what we're going through. They don't know that. I didn't know that blind people don't need to go to the washroom. So this is a thing that's super important to me personally, because if I wasn't this active on speaking to my profs and my friends and new people I meet, my dad's colleagues, whatever, that I have a vision disability, I wouldn't be, let's say, here. I wouldn't be here, literally, I wouldn't be here talking to everyone here. Because we need to talk for us, right? We're not talking for them. We're not talking because of them. We're talking because of us, because we want them to see us for what we are, and our disabilities are part of us. If I took my vision away, I would be a totally different person, because my vision is a part of me, as are all of your guys' disabilities part of you. So I guess my ending point here is it's on us to talk about us. And we need to do that if we expect them that are non-disabled people to understand us. Because if we don't do that, it just becomes a guessing game. And guessing games usually don't work with us. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much to all of our student speakers. We are going to take a break. Okay, perfect. So we've had some really great panels, really great speakers. It's been a really good time. So I'm hoping there is a lot on your minds. We're going to do it one by one, but this is going to be like a town hall situation. Raise your hand. I won't throw a mic at you physically.
So you will literally?
No, I'll meet you halfway, or I'll just come to you. It'll be a case by case basis. But basically, please raise your hand. Please participate. If I have to stand up here for an hour in silence, I'll cry. So we all know the stakes?
Yeah.
All right, so the first question is, how has the fall 2022 term gone for you so far? From what I've heard, god awful. What are some of the barriers you faced? Overwhelming, and how could they be better addressed? Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question. No other DAL students have any? Okay, so now we're going to go on to the next question. Okay, cute. So because I'm from Ontario and we have provincial legislation, and I'm also kind of into policy making, so this is fun for me, but I want to know how Nova Scotia's provincial accessibility and human rights legislation impacts your education and employment. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes before Katya does closing remarks. So we do have 3 more questions. I'm gonna read them all out, and then it's gonna be a free for all. Okay, so question, I'm gonna say 3, but 1 for this context. How has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your education, employment, and well-being? How did you cope, and how could you be better supported? 2, as disabled students, do you feel you're gonna love this one. Do you feel adequately supported by on-campus disability service providers, and how can they better collaborate with students? And finally, do you feel a sense of community with other disabled students at Dalhousie University And what would you like to see happen within the community over the next few years?
All right, thank you everyone so much.
All right, take it away, Katya.
I'll keep it short. Yeah, I guess I just want to say a big thank you to everyone. Since the phrase was so well liked back on Wednesday, we were in St. John's. Like, we appreciate everybody's time, everybody who's played a role in making this event happen. Being a student with a disability is a full-time job, so you know, this is huge to clear almost a whole day and all the prep work and such that went into all the different presentations. And yeah, so we're thankful to everyone who was able to attend either virtually or in person. Yeah. And we're also super thankful to Employment and Social Development Canada's Supports for Student Learning program, who funded this opportunity and made this possible. We really valued hearing your local unique perspectives, and we really hope that we're able to play a role in getting this kind of information and experiences to people who are hopefully able to help us create change.
Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.